Hi everyone, welcome back to STEM Explained. Today I'm really excited because we're joined by Dr. Letitia Hubbard, an engineer, researcher, educator, and longtime STEM mentor. Dr. Hubbard has worked across biomedical engineering, signal processing, and optics, with experiences at organizations like NASA, Medtronic, Duke University, and the North Carolina School of Science and Math. Alongside her research, she has spent years inspiring students through STEM education and outreach through programs across NC. In today's interview, we'll be talking about her journey into STEM, her experiences in research and engineering, and what she's learned from working with students over the years. So thank you so much for joining me today. I guess to start off the interview, could you maybe just give a brief introduction about yourself and then we can go from there?
Sure. My name is Dr. Letitia Hubbard. I am originally from Huntsville, Alabama, home of the Space and Rocket Center. I grew up in Huntsville, then I went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Spelman College and Georgia Tech. I studied physics and electrical engineering, and then I came to North Carolina, and I went to school at Duke University where I studied biomedical engineering with a focus on cardiac electrophysiology. I used computers to study how electrical current moves through the heart. And currently I am teaching at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. I've been there for about 10 years, and I teach biomedical engineering and research.
That's really cool. What motivated you to get into biomedical engineering specifically, at Duke? Yeah.
So I've always been interested in science. I really had a big interest in medicine growing up, science in general, but especially medicine. I started to become more interested in math when I took algebra in 8th grade. And when you add the letters to the numbers, things just started really making sense. And so then I did really well in math in high school. But when I was going to high school, I applied to go to a magnet school. And one of the STEM magnets that they had was pre-engineering. And so this was like a long time ago. And so engineering was not as common at the high school level. But this school had a 4-year pre-engineering magnet program, and I got accepted to that program. And so I did some college level engineering type work from 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, 12th grade. And that's how I really got interested in engineering. We did things like study circuits and build bridges and learned about dimensional analysis and a lot of really important key engineering concepts. And so when it was time for me to go to college, I said, well, I like engineering, but I really, really love medicine too. I like to study the body. The body was just really interesting to me. I could just read nursing books and books about, how the body works. And so I said, well, I think I might like to study biomedical engineering. Biomedical engineering, although it's an old field and it's existed as long as we have had EKGs, this is back, a long time ago. But as a college field that you major in, that's relevant. So when I was going to college, there weren't as many biomedical engineering programs available. And so I went to Spelman College and Georgia Tech. And so I did a dual degree engineering program. Spelman College is a liberal arts college, but they have sciences and math and other STEM courses. And then I went to Georgia Tech for my last 2 years. It was a 5-year program. I went to Georgia Tech for my last 2 years, and I did electrical engineering. And so even though I did not major in biomedical engineering as an undergrad, I still took all of the pre-med requirements. I took biology, organic chemistry. When I was at Georgia Tech, I took bioinstrumentation. I took a lot of biomedical engineering electives. So I had a lot of biomedical engineering under my belt, but I had a very strong background in physics and electrical engineering, which I think is important to have because biomedical engineering is very broad. And so you cannot learn everything there is to know about biomedical engineering. You just can't. That's why it's such a collaborative field. And so my focus was electrical engineering because that's what I liked. So then when it was time for me to go to graduate school, I said, I think I want to specialize. I said, I don't think I really want to go to med school, but I like to study medicine and I like to apply the engineering concepts. And so I looked for biomedical engineering programs across the United States. And then I decided to go to Duke. Duke had one of the oldest biomedical engineering programs. And then I wanted to study the heart at the time. And then the brain also is very intertwined with that because of the electrophysiology connection. But that's how I ended up at Duke for my graduate degree in biomedical engineering. And it's funny because I like to do research, but I do like the computational side. I like to get my hands dirty, but the computational kind of thread was something that kind of followed me both through undergraduate and graduate school.
You mentioned taking a lot of
another piece on that. It was very fortuitous that I was able to teach biomedical engineering at CSSM because that was a continuation of what I had really started to focus on throughout my academic career.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you did a lot of pre-med courses and bio courses even during your electrical and physics degree. at Georgia Tech in those last 2 years. So what was your favorite like course that I guess stood out to you or just like made you really sure that yes, I want to do engineering, but also do something biology, biomedical stuff?
I think it was the collection of all of the courses together. Like biomedical engineering is nice because you can kind of craft your way. So being able to take like anatomy and physiology, I enjoyed that course. I took one in graduate school. It's kind of like an intense kind of short course. It was a semester, but it was like a lot. So I enjoyed that anatomy and physiology. But then when I went to Georgia Tech, I took a lot of signal processing classes. I ended up not focusing as much in signal processing in my graduate work, but I wouldn't say it was any one particular course. I would say it's the collection of being able to kind of put two courses together or multiple courses together and craft a project that combined a lot of different things. Like I liked just to study at the intersection of different fields.
Wait, I remember like when I was surfing through your LinkedIn and stuff, and I remember like at one point you were interning at NASA, and
Yeah.
one of the descriptions was about like signal processing. So could you maybe like describe a little more about that? Because I myself don't really know what that means either.
All right. So signal processing is a very broad field. Again, there are many applications of that. So you can use signal processing in medicine because like the electrical signal from the heart is a signal. When you're talking about telecommunications, how do you get signals to go from Earth to the moon? That's another area. And so my project at NASA, again, this was in college. So I basically used LabVIEW, which is a computer software to look at signals. And that was my project. And so I did a signal processing project 1 year. And then 1 year I did a space optics project to support the TIPMIPS project. And basically, once you go into outer space, you're sending signals back and forth, but you're also trying to see what's out there. And so helping to build or think about new applications for space optics was something else that I did when I was at NASA. I did more work with signal processing when I graduated from undergrad. I spent a summer at Medtronic. And so there I use signal processing to specifically study cardiac EKG signals. And so with cardiac EKG signals, one thing that people who signal process do, they take signals and then they amplify them, they make them bigger, or they filter them to take out certain frequency content. And so the project that I worked at Medtronic was to see if you filter a signal in a certain way, can it give you information about whether or not somebody is going to have a heart attack? So that's a very specific biomedical application of digital signal processing.
Wait, that's really cool. So like it's just kind of like how signals communicate with one another, and it could be like internal, like in the body, but or also external across really large distances too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was curious, there's like just based on your experience and stuff, there's a broad range of things that you've done. Obviously NASA, but also like Medtronic, and then currently with you teaching at NCSSM. So how have those like experiences like are they related, and how have those like influenced one another?
Yeah, I definitely say they're related and they interweave with each other. So let's see. So I'm a STEM person. I enjoy STEM. I like applications of STEM, and that's one of the things that I like about biomedical engineering is because it's very applied. And then the things that you learn in class can be applied in many different areas. So like even though I'm a biomedical engineer, we take things from other fields all the time to be able to apply to the body. And then as an educator, I love being able to help to train the next generation of STEM students. And so to me, it's all interwoven together. When I was a graduate student, I did a lot of STEM outreach. I worked with the Boost program at Duke. I taught like a 5th grade class and we did science experiments at NCSSM. Even though I am a teacher, I am a STEM enthusiast. And then I also work with research. And so to me, it's like a full circle kind of connection between these things, both practicing the actual engineering, teaching the engineering, and then inspiring and training students how to be researchers and engineers.
What inspired you to get into like the STEM outreach side of things as well as the professional side of research and engineering fields and everything?
Yes, yeah. So after graduate school, that's kind of what I did for fun was STEM outreach. Like I said, I worked with the Boost program, so working with the 5th grade class. I did a lot of teaching assistantships. So like graduate students work as TAs for different classes, and I think you're required to do 1 or 2 of those, and I did definitely more than that. I was TA for the electrophysiology class at Duke. And I had like over 100 students and helped them like get through their projects and help them with their homework and also helped to oversee what was happening actually in the lab environment. And so I did another project. This is just like a project on my own. Duke has an immersive environment called the Dive, and just just for the fun of it, I had some students working with me to try and come up with like an immersive 3D heart that you could go through and learn about the heart. And so that was with the science education program too. I don't even know if they would remember that I did. It was such a small project, but it's something that I just like to do. I always like K-12. Even when I was in graduate school, I said I like to work with K-12, and I would love to do some public policy or some like STEM outreach as part of the work that I did. I enjoy working with youth. I've always done a lot of working with youth through my church. Even while I was in graduate school, I worked a lot with youth. And so it's kind of like a mix of just all of my interests to be able to work at the K-12 level. And then it's kind of like outreach, it's like outreach is my job to train in education, but it's at a very high level. I mean, NCSSM is a very, and then the rigor of the courses that we're able to teach is incredible. And so definitely that STEM outreach, but still being able to do very high quality research as well as teaching.
But this is a question that I thought of while you were speaking. Like a lot of the experiences that you've shared, they're very they're very different. They're not very I mean, they're not like you would assume they would all go together, but they all make sense when you talk about them as like interwoven. So how did you find like that mix of experiences or like things that you want to do, but still maintaining all of your interests and stuff?
So they sound very different, but I mean, I work in biomedical engineering, but I have a very electrical engineering focus. And so that is kind of like a thread. I work with like circuits and electrical engineering as applied to the body. And I think because I am an educator, the outreach comes naturally. I think outreach is a part of education. And I think part of being a good biomedical engineering is being interested in other things. Like you can be focused, but just being interested in how the different puzzle pieces come together to make new discoveries. And the thing is, as an educator, I'm not only doing that in the STEM field, but I'm also doing that in education. How can we teach students more effectively? How can we introduce them to the many new technologies that are coming out? That's the thing about biomedical engineering. It's rapidly changing, rapidly, there are always new innovations coming. And so you have to be on top of the different things that are happening. It's just, I think that's one of the things that makes people more successful in biomedical engineering, where they're able to take different pieces of the puzzle and put them together in new and interesting ways, and then also being able to adapt very quickly to changes that are happening in the field. So even though it seems like a lot of different things, I think that's part of the nature of the field, and being able to do that and then pull other people in with their expertise to be able to contribute, and then you are also contributing your expertise. That's a part of how the field works.
Kind of going a little off topic, but I think kind of in the same realm. What are some differences that you've noticed within like academic research and labs and versus like industry jobs, and then I guess versus both of those to teaching and mentorship?
So can you repeat that question? The difference between like industry and academia?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I worked briefly in industry when I worked at Medtronic, which was an amazing experience. It's very focused. Like you have a task at hand. They like in the research department, like you have some kind of flexibility in what you study and like how you decide to pursue the topic. But and you're learning things, but your goal is to make money, profit for the company. And so like you really focus on your project that you have and the applications that can be used to move the interests of the company forward. A lot of people in industry that my colleagues, they still do STEM outreach. Some of them do a lot of STEM outreach. The focus is your task that you have as an engineer or as a researcher. In academics, it depends. If you are at the higher education level, post-secondary, you have 3 arms: your research, teaching, and also service. And so at different points in your career, you're focused on research, more teaching, or more service, but you're balancing all 3 of those. And like there's different institutions. So some institutions are just teaching institutions. So you're not as focused on the research. You may do some research, but you don't do a lot of research. Those are like 4-year colleges where they don't have like graduate programs. And then there's some graduate programs where the research, that is where you write grants, you bring money in, and that is your main focus. And there's some really good teachers who are also really great researchers. And then there's academia. I guess NCSSM, even though it's a high school, there is still still an extent of academia. We also do research, teaching, and focus. Different teachers at NCSM do different levels of research, but our focus is training students how to do research, instead of doing the research ourselves. And so the main focus of NCSM is teaching, like training students, even though we don't directly do research, training students how to do research, assisting them with their projects, making sure that our curriculum is robust and that it's rigorous for students. And then we still service, like we still do outreach, we still do professional development. And so the goal in academia could be either research, and for a lot of people, it is training students and the future generations, and that is a much different focus than industry. The focus is not as much to make money, and then there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you're training students. So that to me would be the difference between industry and academia.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think those experiences are related, but also very different in terms of just like what's the priority in between the two experiences.
Yeah.
Kind of building off of the like mentorship idea and aspect, what skills specifically do you think is really important for students interested in research or engineering beyond just like academics or taking advanced courses?
Right. So you definitely want to take advanced courses. You want to be curious. I say intellectual curiosity is so important. Like, in school, maybe you're like, oh, I'm just going to get through this problem set, but you need to be curious. When things go wrong, you don't just say, oh, whatever, that's just what happened. Like you have to be like, why didn't that work? Or man, this result is different than what I thought it was going to be. Let me probe a little bit more carefully and see what happened. Some of the most interesting discoveries are when somebody was like, wait, that's different. Let me see what happened. So definitely intellectual curiosity, just not persistence, not giving up. Like, especially with like graduate school, it gets hard and you need to be able to say, even though this is hard, I'm going to stick this out and I'm going to finish. So persistence, intellectual curiosity, persistence. I would say willingness to collaborate, especially now, especially in fields like biomedical engineering, because you can't know everything that there is to know. A willingness to adapt, to be able to try new things, follow where the research is leading you, and to be comfortable with uncertainty. Yeah. And I say that more so. Some people, a lot of people say, oh, you need to be comfortable with failure. That is true, but it's the uncertainty that comes from failure and the willingness to go back and ask the hard questions again about what is happening and like what does it mean for the big picture and how you can maybe adapt your research to probe these new directions that are occurring in the research study.
How do you think the best way for students just to learn those skills? Because a lot of those skills are, in my opinion, not the easiest to learn in like an academic setting where you have like deadlines or things where you have to like succeed in. So how can students be proactive in just like learning those skills so that they can be successful in research?
Yeah, practice. Like I know in school we do a lot of quizzes and you do homeworks, but you need to do projects, open-ended projects where the answer is not given, it's not assured, where your teacher might not even know the answer. For me as a teacher, that is one area where I see students sometimes struggle a lot, is when we have projects and they're like, so what's the answer? They want to know the answer. I'm like, sometimes I don't even know the answer. Like you have to be comfortable with uncertainty. And the way you do that is you pick questions and problems that don't necessarily have a right answer. And you have to do that. So I'm a big fan of project-based learning and problem-based learning, independent research, some of the summer programs like the one you're doing, summer research programs, just to be able to like try things. Like you can't be afraid to try things and ask questions. I know when I worked at Medtronic, I did interviews, like information interviews with some of the different people who were in different jobs at the company. Ask questions. Yeah, that's another way. Observe, see if you can shadow researchers and see what they're doing, to ask them questions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess just like learning from the people who have done it to learn what you need to do so you can get to that level in the future, obviously. Yeah. So like I want to talk a little bit more of just like your experience at NCSM. So just in terms of your experience, what do you think truly gets students excited about STEM and just like learning in that field?
Yeah, I think when students understand the connection between what they're learning in the real world, it makes a world of difference. I know about medical engineering, a lot of students have already come to my class and they've taken physics or they've taken biology or chemistry, but we apply it directly to like applications in the body And so like, we're like, this is why differential equations is important for how the currents flow in and out of the cell. Or we say, in medical imaging works this way. And so understanding, how particles move or how a magnetic field is set up. This is what makes an X-ray work, or this is what makes an MRI work. When we're talking about biomaterials, we're talking about you have a hip implant. If the hip implant is made out of the right material, it will break. Like making things very practical, very real world. That's one way of giving students the context. And then the second thing is giving students something hands-on to do. Of course, you have to do the theory and you have to do the practice problems, but something hands-on where you can see the connection between the theory and then the actual experimental setup. I think that makes a light bulb go off in students' head when they can actually see that. Like when you see a physics experiment in action, it's just different. It's just different.
Yeah. I vividly remember this one experiment we did in physics class. It was like a really simple one about like friction and like I think it was like the difference between kinetic friction and static friction, and we did like a ramp thing, and it made sense like mathematically with the numbers, but then seeing it, it was like, oh, well, this is literally what's happening right now. Like,
Yeah.
there's no denying that. So I feel like the connection between the two, I think, makes it much more interesting. Yeah. So with all of just the new technology advances with obviously AI and stuff, have you noticed any differences between how students have been interacting with like STEM or
I'd say just that students are definitely becoming more interdisciplinary because the boundaries between different fields aren't like how they used to be. Like when people come in my biomedical engineering class, a lot of times for the first time they're seeing all of these different fields kind of emerging on each other. And I think as you have more access to more resources, you begin to see all of these interactions between fields. So students are more interdisciplinary. I mean, they appreciate courses where they can be interdisciplinary. Students are more collaborative. And then as teachers, we have to find ways to push students beyond the boundaries of just learning just for knowledge and showing them how to apply it. Because with things like AI, it's easy to just go look up answers. And so finding other ways to challenge students to think more deeply and then also explain in depth their understanding is a challenge for both students and teachers.
as like a fun question, what's the coolest project that you remember like a student doing in one of your classes or when you were a TA?
Students have done some really cool projects. I would say one of my standout experiences with students was when our students did the Samsung Software Tomorrow competition, recyclables and non-recyclables. That was one of the first collaborative and very application-based projects that I did with students. And so we had a student, AI was fairly new at the time, but we had a couple of students who were working with the AI component. We were taking pictures of trash so that you could discriminate, use like image processing to like discriminate between, is this a soda can? Is this a glass bottle? And so I really like that because you're doing the fundamental like learning of like the computer science or the artificial intelligence, but you're also like collaborating with others to develop a project plan and just the whole beginning to end stage of looking at how to develop a project that is not just theoretical but is practical. I found to be very interesting. See another student project. Oh, I remember about years ago, I taught the summer research and engineering program. There were a lot of interesting projects that come out of that because the students can basically work on almost anything in engineering, and some do like biomedical. But I had one student that was really interested in plants, and we had some limitations in what we could do at the high school level, but she was interested she wanted to generate nanoparticles. And so even though that's not my area, like we were able to like put together some experience. I have a little background in chemistry, not a lot, but we were able to do some experiments to generate nanoparticles and test them on the growth of plants. And so that was cool because she really pushed that project forth from beginning to end and said, this is what I like to do. And then I tried to make sure she had the resources to make sure she could do that. And we were actually able to take the nanoparticles that she generated, both using traditional methods and green synthesis of nanoparticles. And then we were able to test them at the materials, the shared materials instrumentation facility at Duke, and there were nanoparticles there, and then actually applying them to the plants and seeing, how it affected the plant germination and growth. And so that was cool. We weren't able to take the project long term, but it was wonderful to see the students take initiative and then do the research and helping you to train her how to read the research. How do you pull out the different parts from the different papers about the methods? And then how do you compare your results with the results that you got? And I enjoyed working with the student on that particular project. There have been some pretty amazing projects that have come through the summer reach program and just those students that I've been able to work with.
That's really cool. Like just like making nanoparticles in and of itself, it sounds so like advanced, but doing that in like a high school level and being able to do that with high school resources in that time period is so cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
How do you think students can like settle on an idea? Because personally, I know that when I'm trying to do research and stuff like that, I always get confused on like, should I do this or how do I do this? Can I do this with my time constraints? So
Yeah.
how would you suggest like people who would want to like preliminary research wise get settled on like a topic or like an experimental setup?
This is a very interesting question because I work with a lot of students in CSSM on research projects through the mentorship program and also through the summer research program. Time constraints is big. And so you have to do your background research. That's where all research starts. You need to go and read the literature. That is where you start. And you read and see what other people have done. And you see what their methods are. You see if you have access to those resources that they are doing, or if there is an alternative way that you can approach the research. And then you write out like a grant proposal that talks about the background research, how you are going to synthesize the different research papers that you have read and use that to come up with your own new idea that you are going to test. And then you write out clear specific aims about what exactly it is that you are going to try to study. It needs to be something that is measurable and something that is specific. And then you write out a very specific methodology about what you are going to do and how you are going to do it. Yeah. And so that is where having like a trained research professor to help you kind of work through the details. Well, how long will this actually take? How many times will you have to repeat this? What will you do? You have to write out maybe your limitations, expected results. What will you do if things go wrong? Safety protocols. So walking through that at the beginning of the research experience and not just jumping into the research, but like thinking through, okay, what have others done before me? What am I doing that's similar? Sometimes with a research project, you try to reproduce what people have done before, just to get your hands dirty. And then you gradually bring in something new that you do. So that's an option, starting off with something that's been done before, especially if it's a longer term research experience. If you start off even if you're programming, you program something that somebody's programmed before, see if you get the same output. And then you start changing parameters and seeing if you can come up with something new. But you always start off with that background research.
Looks like a lot of reading, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like a classic question. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self if they were in high school or middle school?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say do not be scared to try new things. That's something that I struggle with a lot. Is sometimes you want to do things because you're like, oh, I've done that before. I feel comfortable doing this. Try new things. That's how your brain actually grows and stays active. I was reading something that was saying that a lot of times, like if your brain is not making those new connections, leads to your brain to atrophy. So you always want to be trying new things and don't be afraid, especially in high school. Like I know you want the A's in the courses, but don't be afraid to try something new that you've never done before. And don't be afraid to say, I don't like this. Don't think that because you've always done the thing that you have to continue to do it. Like you can say, I can do this, but I just prefer to do something else. That is another thing that is okay to say. I prefer something else to what I'm currently working on. Don't be afraid to try that other thing that you're interested in.
Yeah, I do think especially like in high school and senior year where you're just like stressed about like getting good grades. You just want to be safe and
Yes,
just take
yes.
all
Don't be safe.
to play safe.
Don't
Yeah.
be safe. especially when you don't have as much to lose, you know. Maybe you'll have to go back home and stay with your parents, but you don't have like bills yet, or like don't be safe. Be try something new and different at least one time.
Yeah.
And use your
That's
summers to
definitely what
do
I'm trying
that.
to do. So definitely what I'm going to trying to do now, just like try to do as many things as I can and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join the interview, letting me interview.
You're very
I really appreciate it.
welcome. Yes, yes. You take care.
Of course, you too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.